No, I think the best way to start off is just high level, try to get your perspectives on what, let's say in the near term, 5 to 10 years, what should Delaware and the Mid-Atlantic's energy grid look like? What is that mix? What is that optimal mix given constraints that we have now? What is achievable, I think is the question. So who would like to start? What is achievable for our energy grid in 5 years? How about that?
All right, I'll jump in. Let's start off with hydrogen, but I think it's got the answer. The answer really has to be the root cause. I mean, the root solution, which is Delawareans want the lowest cost and cleanest energy. So how are we going to get there? Our energy portfolio needs to be different than that of Phoenix, Arizona, or Manitoba. It needs to be representative of what we have here. So my answer is D, all of the above. We heard about nuclear and solar and wind, and now we'll hear about hydrogen.
And let me just refine my question. So specifically, I'm thinking of the energy that produces electrons. So hydrogen would consume electrons. So what would be the best mix of, and I think you said everything, all of the above, but specifically to power plant production, so electricity production.
Hydrogen can also be packaged electrons, and hydrogen can also decarbonize. So it's multifaceted. I'm agnostic of where the electrons come from, but I think you have to build on the infrastructure that we have now, which is moving electrons from point A to point B, which is our homes or businesses. Nuclear is a great way, as is wind and solar.
Nuclear and more natural gas, or?
Natural gas is fine with me.
Okay. What do you think, Chris?
5 years. Well, I think, what does the energy system look like in 5 years? So I'll start with saying that we have 2 offshore wind farms under development right off our coast that together could meet the peak energy demands of the state of Delaware. So the one wind farm, which is the furthest along, is the U.S. Wind Project. Its capacity is 1.7 gigawatts. And its first phase is scheduled to be completed by the end of 2029. So I'm not too good with math, but I think that is within 5 years. The whole thing could be done within 10 years. The other project is Ørsted's Skipjack project. It has in its lease area somewhere between 1 to, let's say, like 1.5 to 1.8 in its total lease area out there, gigawatts of energy that could be produced theoretically within 10 years. So I think the future in terms of generation for Delaware, and these projects will interconnect to the regional grid within Delaware, is offshore wind. Now the question is, will we get these projects online?
Can I just jump in real quick?
Please do.
And I'll let you finish. But with Ørsted Skipjack project, can you tell me, they put a pause on that, but they didn't completely back out. What is the status of that project? Is it dead?
No, it is not dead. It is still under development for sure. What has changed with that project is they canceled their power purchase agreement, their OREC agreement with the state of Maryland that was financially supporting the project. And this is not unusual. Many other offshore wind projects up and down the coast have had to do this because of rising costs, high interest rates, and supply chain. So they simply need another off-taker or purchaser of their power. So it doesn't look good finding that anytime soon, which is why I was going to say I like the 10-year question better than the 5-year question. And I would like to take the opportunity to give my 2 cents about what else should be on our grid. Certainly small nuclear reactors is something that we should be pursuing, but I do not think that we should be pursuing new gas plants. I think that is community suicide to keep adding additional carbon to the atmosphere when we already have so much now that it's almost impossible to figure out how we're going to deal with the causes of what we have right now. And when we're talking about natural gas, we're talking about gas which is mostly methane. Methane is one of the most intense greenhouse gases that we have. And when you look at the life cycle analysis of the global warming impact of methane, when you look at its extraction its transport, it is almost as high as that of coal, according to new research. And the reason is because it's leaking. It's leaking when you mine it, it's leaking when you transport it, it's leaking when you transport it across the ocean in a tanker. So I don't think we should be thinking about natural gas at all. I think what we should really be focusing on are the clean energy sources that we have available to us, solar, battery storage. These things are coming down in cost precipitously, and we should not forget about the abundant resource, unlimited off our coast with offshore wind.
So,
Yeah, I want to
Please.
jump in. We completely agree about methane and one of the worst natural greenhouse gases. But I want to be careful not to let perfection be the enemy of good enough. In this transition, I look at what California's paying per kilowatt hour. We're up in arms about what we're paying in Delaware. It's 25 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity in California. We hear a lot about how we're modeling our legislation after that. We're 11 or 12 cents a kilowatt hour now. We don't want to double that. So there's a transition. We shouldn't build perhaps new plants, but we shouldn't take offline until we're ready to replace those electrons. And the second point is, every mile that you move electrons, whether it's methane or wherever they're from, you lose 2 to 5% along those lines. There's natural spillage of electrons everywhere. Whereas every mile that you move gaseous hydrogen, you lose 0%.
I understand.
That's part of how the infrastructure can change.
I do want to just interject a bit on the price per kilowatt hour. I know I had a long conversation with an official at DMEC who told me that it is very difficult to compare prices across jurisdictions because of how many different parts of the cost are shoved into that price per kilowatt hour. Some might call just the basic supply of energies that price. Others will put fees into that cost. So I hear you.
There are some fees in the Delaware bills right now, too.
That's what I'm saying. Absolutely.
So, I mean, it's pretty easy to measure if you're a resident. What are you paying?
Right. What is on that bill? For sure. So we heard modular nuclear. We heard more wind. We heard natural gas. How is it, whatever your preferred mix is in the future, how are we going to get our wonderful elected officials to approve those sorts of projects? To just about every source of energy, there is a group that will likely oppose it and likely oppose it vociferously. How are we going to get there?
Please, you go ahead.
All right, thanks, Chris.
It's an easy one, so please.
I think from our perspective, it's about running a truly sustainable company. And sustainability to me, and what it's meant all day long, was about the environment, and absolutely for sure. But a truly sustainable company and the potential to launch a whole new economy means that you're profitable. It's a smart business decision that is also clean. That's how we're founded, and that's what we'll do. And then you bring that to the state of Delaware, and we've had tremendous support. And I would expect it when we have our plans to be approved very quickly. And we'll do the community engagement, which is part of what we're doing here.
Well, let's go on that. How are you going to power your plants? How are you going to produce that hydrogen? What electricity source are you going to use?
The first thing we're going to do so that we can get online as soon as possible is a green PPA, a green power purchase agreement. As we start doing that, you heard Greg talk about behind-the-meter wind. We'll put our own behind-the-meter wind in. On land, it makes financial sense for us. I'll pay for that on my own. I'm not worried about that. So we start phasing that in, and that's exactly what I mean. Don't let perfection be the enemy of good enough. Start with 100% green PPA, phase that out as we phase in our own solar and wind. And hopefully, I'll sign up to be an off-taker at the right kilowatt hour price for offshore wind. I'll be an off-taker for that, absolutely.
And I think that's a beautiful energy future for the state of Delaware. There really is wonderful capacity for further offshore wind to be developed to supply the green hydrogen energy chain. Carl, your question was about
How do we convince
yeah,
the regulators, those who approve these projects? It's hard.
Yep.
You have to, in some ways, you have to convince people to do different things if we're going to incentivize electric cars, which is a little bit different, or you just have to convince them that you should have a modular nuclear reactor next to your house.
I wouldn't put
I
it
mean,
next to your house, but I would be comfortable with a hydrogen generation plant, not necessarily in my backyard, but a lot closer to my home than I would coal or gas and nuclear.
Sure, but we still have to power that with electricity.
We
With
do.
a power purchase agreement that's
No,
going to
no, no.
compete with the grid, right?
I'm
No?
sorry,
Go ahead, please
Carl.
tell me.
I was
Tell me.
actually burning the hydrogen to generate the electrons. So that would not be a case where you're making the electrons right next to your house. You're using the hydrogen. Hydrogen is like wave-particle duality. It can be two things at once. It can be a chemical that is now clean and decarbonizing hard-to-decarbonize industries, or it could be prepackaged energy. So we're saying deliver that to the hydrogen turbines, which Siemens Energy, and we have a deal with, they make those hydrogen turbines. You burn that, and that generates your electrons a lot closer. And the byproduct is water.
Okay, so my understanding, I may have been misunderstanding it, is your plants will produce hydrogen as well as consume hydrogen. Is that correct?
We will produce hydrogen and then sell it to somebody who will then consume it and convert that, and at some point in the time, at some point in the future, convert that into electrons.
Okay, and it will use electrons initially on the front end to produce it.
Yes.
Right.
So, Carl, I want to just jump back to your question about how are we going to get the green energy in Delaware. And I would like to first give a plug to the environmental organizations and the advocates that are in the audience, because those groups are going to be very essential to this. Delaware Nature Society, the Sierra Club, the Center for the Inland Bays, they are very effective at advocacy, but they need help. So the people that are making these energy decisions that are affecting your pocketbook and your future, they are hearing from people that don't want green energy for a variety of reasons. We are a hotbed of NIMBYism. We love the NIMBYism, right? We have to combat that. We have to, if you care about green energy, we need to be reaching out to our elected officials and talking to them about it a lot. The great news about living in Delaware, and everybody knows that who has lived here for some time, is we have the best, most wonderful elected officials at all levels of government. This is Delaware. This is the place where you can talk to them as friends, as wonderful constituents that they respect. And I do it all the time. And it's just amazing. Like, for example, Senator Sarah McBride's office reached out to them a number of different times with my opinions. Every time I reached out, I got a response back. Like, imagine how many people are calling them. That's the level of dedication that we have here in Delaware. It is up to us to speak our mind to our elected officials a lot. And the great news is they will listen. And I almost forgot about Sussex Preservation Coalition, who is doing wonderful, wonderful work in Sussex County.
So it's messaging, primarily.
It's a lot of people. I mean, it's a lot of people. What is going on right now, the fact that the tax credits are being, for renewable energy projects are being considered to be taken off the table is catastrophic, not only to our climate, but also to our economy. So everybody, whether you love green energy or not, has a stake in that and should be reaching out and saying, preserve these tax credits. It makes no sense to upend our electrical economy right now when all we need is more new, clean energy.
Understood. So there's another obstacle towards new production of electrons, and that's what I've been told by various people is this queue, they call it, this long line of proposed power plants across the region, across the PJM region, that this regional energy regulator, PJM, has not approved. It's gone very slowly. I guess they're moving quicker, but how do we nudge them to move those approvals through quicker, if that's even possible?
I don't have any idea how you do that. But I think what I look at is it's probably easy to blame PJM, and I'm sure they deserve part of it. Though I never spoke to anybody from PJM, so I don't know how valid this opinion is. But to me, in my mind, it's about putting smarter projects at the top of the pipeline that make economic sense. And whether you're an R or a D, and you can appreciate smart energy that's low cost and clean, and you get something that's viable. I imagine it's going to move faster than what is happening right now. But I don't know. I don't know how PJM works.
I'm
Very
in
complex.
the same boat.
Sure.
I can't figure it out either. I do know that in Texas, it takes like half as long to get new energy on the grid. If they can do it in Texas, we should be able to do it here. And I like what some states are doing in terms of taking a harder line with PJM, like Pennsylvania. So hopefully there's a regional solution among states to pressure this group to be able to move new clean power onto the grid faster, because what could be more important?
Yeah, you can be big and slow, like California. You can be big and apparently fast, like Texas, but you cannot be small and slow. And Delaware has a little bit of small and slow right now.
Would some of the messaging call that you've made, should that be directed towards PJM? That Chris, you've made. Should that be directed towards PJM?
I mean, yes, and that's sort of the mystery of how do you influence PJM. I don't pretend to know that, but maybe that's the next forum.
Understood. I also don't know the answer to that question. Let's talk about kind of the specific struggles to your respective industries. Chris, you're the de facto offshore wind guy. We've seen the Trump administration has pushed significantly back against various projects. Actually, before we get into that, first, what can you tell me about the reason that Ørsted put a pause on the Skipjack project, if you can?
It was solely financial reasons. So, and they were not unique to Ørsted.
Interest rates, or?
Yeah, it was really a trifecta. We had historically high levels of inflation combined with serious supply chain issues coming out of the pandemic, combined with very high interest rates. Just like we're all experiencing, if you think about wanting to buy a home, it's even worse for developing an offshore wind farm. The capital or the interest rates, that's like the fuel for offshore wind farms in terms of the budget. So that's why you saw up and down the coast so many projects having to renegotiate their financial agreements with the states that wanted that power. So Ørsted was put into a position where the agreement that it had with the state of Maryland no longer met its financial needs, and they had to cancel the agreement and are looking, or at least were looking, for new opportunities for new agreements.
So they, as far as you know, have not lost interest in the United States market.
I mean, I really can't speak to that,
Sure.
but to put it in perspective, Ørsted has the Block Island wind farm that they're operating. It's the nation's first wind farm. They also completed construction last year on the nation's first commercial scale wind farm, which is producing enough power for 70,000 homes off Long Island right now. It's performing wonderfully, and they are developing other projects on the coast. So that's what I can tell you. Those are the bright spots.
Yeah, please.
I think I'm out of order, but that's typically what I do. I'd like to ask a question. As a potential off-taker, I want to buy my electrons clean, and I want to buy them cheap. My understanding, it's about $3,000 a kilowatt hour to install offshore wind versus about $1,000 a kilowatt hour to install onshore wind. If I'm looking to buy offshore wind, would it be 3 times as expensive?
I don't know the.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's a
Good
good
question.
I don't know.
I want
the
to buy
exact,
it. I want to, right?
I don't know the exact numbers on that, on what is the price of wind right now. I think it was, at my last check, it was like 150 to 175 per megawatt. So it is relatively expensive for other forms of energy, but a lot of what goes into that cost are community benefits, right? Things like economic development in the states that are buying those. And there's a lot of variation in that cost. Like the Coastal Virginia offshore wind farm has a fairly low cost. They're building a 2.6 gigawatt power plant right now, which is absolutely huge. It's one of the biggest offshore wind power plants in the world that's being created right off the coast there. It's going to power 600,000 homes. It's going to have 1,000 jobs. in its construction and 1,000 jobs in its operation, and it has revitalized the Hampton Roads port area of Virginia. So that's the kind of the bigger picture of how offshore wind is working to revitalize American industry.
And Block Island, is that 5 wind turbines?
It's like 5 or 7.
5 that
Yeah.
does 70,000 homes.
Well,
Gives you an
that
idea.
is just as a correction, that's the South Fork Wind Project. They have 12 turbines that are powering 70,000 homes on Long
I
Island.
want to buy your Electron.
And just so we
Cheaply.
can kind of understand, for us laymen here, if that power is so much more expensive, how is it that it will be financially viable when it goes through the auction process and they set a price and everybody else can produce it so much cheaper on land, if that's true? How does that power ultimately get to houses if the price is too low for them to produce it at that price?
I think right now, under the Delaware law that was passed last year, there was a benchmark price set, which was a consumer protection price, and it was set on an average of the natural gas prices over the past 3 years. I don't think there's going to be much interest in that current price right now. However, there should be factors that will, again, decrease the price of offshore wind in the future as the supply chain builds in the United States. Hopefully, as interest rates come down, hopefully they'll come down, and supply chains globally, in theory, get a little bit better. In addition, the other factor there is that we know the cost of energy here, the energy that we have now, is going up because there is such a huge increase in demand, and the older power plants on the system that are burning coal and that are burning natural gas, those are coming off because they're no longer economical. So the market is going to change, and I think eventually offshore wind will become cost competitive on its own. Now, the other thing that when we talk about the price of energy, we often leave out the most important thing when we're looking at different energy sources, which is the climate and the health benefits. That doesn't always get factored in, but there are extreme costs to our communities, our health, and our environment from burning coal and from burning natural gas. And when you factor that in, there's just no comparison that offshore wind, renewables like solar and battery storage is the way to go.
Well, then the obvious follow-up question to that is, shouldn't we put that cost into the ultimate price of the fuel and with a carbon tax or some other type of tax that captures that cost?
My answer to that is absolutely, because it protects our health, it protects our communities, and it protects our way of life.
And would raise prices even higher than we already have, presumably?
Yeah, I mean, we're at a time where we have to face the facts.
Sure.
And I'm at a place where I say absolutely not. I can envision, and Delaware should embrace this because we're not sitting on coal. We're not sitting on oil and natural gas. We are sitting on all the water we need to do this. But let's combine your offshore wind. We make those electrons out there, or wind makes those electrons out there. We move it, 10, 12 miles to the coastline. I'll put a hydrogen plant there and convert those electrons into hydrogen, where we then transport that to the end use, where they are reconverted to electrons. Let's say we're moving the hydrogen 100 miles, 12 miles to the coast. That's where we lose some electrons. And then to move the hydrogen another 100 miles, you don't lose anything. It becomes more effective. There's no tax on that. It's a lower price, and it's still green. I think that's visionary for the next 10, 15, 20 years of how we can convert this and how Delaware can lead the way economically on that.
And we're moving the hydrogen on trucks or in pipelines or both?
I would love a pipeline. That's the most effective way to do that. And there's pipelines all over. There's 1,600 miles of pipelines in the United States right now. The world knows how to use hydrogen. The world uses 97 million metric tons of hydrogen every year. Move it by pipeline, because otherwise, like if you're moving it by diesel trucks, kind of defeats the purpose. But you move it by pipeline right to where you're going to use it. And do you know Mach 2, the tri-state area, is sitting on fossilized pipelines of the old petroleum industry? God, let's convert this. That's what the future should look like.
Well, since you brought up Mach 2, it's a couple questions. No, it's perfect. So just so everyone knows, a couple of years ago, then President Biden made an announcement that he would commit $7 billion to create what he called these hydrogen hubs across the country. One of them was here in the Mid-Atlantic. Since that time, things have been slow to progress, to say the least. it may not progress any further now under the current administration. So how does that impact you and your plans? Because you were part of that project.
That's true.
And still are, I think, right?
Yeah, we still are. We're
Yeah.
a founding member, anchor member of Mach 2, and we are awarded $23 million in grants through different phases of Mach 2.
And just real quick, your company specifically was?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And have you received any of that money yet? Or?
Not yet. We
Not yet.
just filed. It's a little bit slow. We just filed for our first reimbursement last week. So it should be 60 days. Phase 1 and Phase 2 money is already there, and we plan to be first to market. But a rising tide lifts all ships. For us to be successful in the hydrogen industry, we need the overall hydrogen economy to build out around us. End users, producers, transporters, all of that. That doesn't happen without Mach 2. Nevertheless, Mach 2 goes away, makes it more difficult for us. All the tax credits go away. I'll take the free money for sure. We don't need it. We have a responsible business plan. We're moving forward with this. And I sure hope the interest rates come down because we're looking at about $1 billion in infrastructure build, and they don't want to pay 7% on that.
And I'll just ask you about your business plan a little bit. How much you can? What is your market? Who are your potential clients? What is this business about?
This is a beautiful area for industry, but that means there's a lot of brownfields, there's a lot of pollution. So what can we do to first follow through on cleaning the environment? Hydrogen is produced today is very dirty hydrogen. It produces a lot of carbon dioxide. Our hydrogen would be clean. We would hope to displace that dirty hydrogen in industries that's around us. And we did a market analysis of the tri-state area. Over the next 3 or 4 years, we think there's about a market need of 2,000 metric tons of hydrogen as a chemical, not energy yet. We could sell right into that market, and we already have LOIs on offtake agreements signed up for that. So that's the transition plan. Don't let perfection be the enemy of good enough. Right. So I got that right. So we're going to sell into the chemical market, and when the engineering catches up, we're going to transition into the energy market.
And you have the contracts already signed for the
I don't have
consumers,
contracts signed.
but you have the
No,
LOIs. I'm
no.
sorry. Yeah,
Right.
right.
We have the LOIs.
And on the other side, I know we already hashed this out, but do you have any sort of document signed for power production for the electricity for it?
No, we don't have that. We won't need to do that until a little bit later in the process when we actually finalize our site selection, multiple sites selections, because it'll be different for each site.
And let's break some news. Where are those sites?
We haven't signed yet, so not able to do that.
But we're considering Delaware, Maryland.
The Delmarva Peninsula, overall, the Delmarva Peninsula is beautifully set up for the hydrogen economy of the next 2 centuries. It's beautiful. Delaware can take a leading role in that, and all 5 of our sites right now are focused in Delaware. But I haven't bought any land yet.
Well, I'll be tracking property records to see when.
I've already
When I could find that story.
I've already promised Allison that she's going to be the first to know.
All right, good to know. Well, I want to ask about there has been vocal opposition to the idea of a hydrogen hub, at least in the Mid-Atlantic. I don't know about more broadly, but the argument from the Delaware Riverkeeper, as we'd spoke about, is that renewable energy should be used to power homes and businesses directly, and should not be used to create hydrogen that can then be stored to power something else. That it's one step too many. What's your response to that? And then I'll ask Chris, what do you think about that as well?
Sure. First of all, I do want to add another point to make it more difficult for me to answer the question.
Sure.
But it takes more energy. Right now, it takes more energy to make hydrogen than when you burn it that it will actually produce itself. So that's a real concern. The laws of nature are on our side. The laws of nature say when you burn hydrogen, you get 287 units of energy. But to make it the way we want to make it, it takes 230. That's a net positive. Our engineering is not there yet. But the river, I would say, is the river keepers are very vocal. But up and down this state, 99%, basically everybody else, is supporting our program when they spend the time to sit down and talk to us. Republicans, Democrats, doesn't matter. So just going to use the electrons directly doesn't make economic sense to me. Because what if it's sunny, but I saw the wind turbine today, it wasn't blowing. So, hey, our economy is only going to work on 50% today because we have sun but no wind. We need the reliability to be able, for these data centers, for the advanced AI that's coming, and for a new economy. You can't have intermittent power.
We talked before about hydrogen being, you can kind of think of it as being a battery. Is there any possibility of hydrogen itself being used as a battery bank for renewable energy?
I look at hydrogen, eventually, yes. In 10 years, when the engineering catches up, yes. I look at hydrogen in two ways: as a chemical reagent, which will sell today, and what will sell tomorrow will be pre-packaged energy that when you move it along power lines or pipelines, you don't lose anything. So it's more effective and efficient energy in the future, 10 years in the future.
I would say
And
in
what do you
terms
think
of the concerns that the river keepers have expressed, I mean, it makes sense. You know, but I think my opinion is that we need to ensure that we're bringing on viable forms of renewable energy and storage, even if it's not perfect. So I don't think that it should get in the way of the development of hydrogen in the state of Delaware. I would also say, too, some of the concerns that I've heard the river keepers express was from communities like around Chester and Wilmington that have borne the brunt of fossil fuel production in the past and have clearly not been heard and not been listened to. And it's really painful to know that and hear their concerns. So I think that has to be acknowledged and addressed, and that goes for any kind of energy development. We have to do more to make sure that communities that have suffered the most are being brought along into the energy transition.
And what could be more clean than hydrogen? It starts from water. It starts from water, and it goes back to water. No carbon dioxide, no soot, anything. I dig it. I grew up in a place in Philadelphia, had an incinerator at the top of the hill in Manayunk. And in July, we thought it snowed on a Tuesday because there was ash on the ground. It turns out that's not ash. I get it. But that happens. And I actually stumbled into this because in my weird chemist world, I go into people and like, oh my God, I got this great business idea. We're going to make an energy company, but run it like a chemical company. You're going to love it in your neighborhood. Here's why. And everybody got turned off on that because of the brownfield trauma that we have in this state. So then when I had a little bit of a different approach after that point and said, here's why it's a responsible way to do it. Hydrogen's that answer.
So why don't you have a, maybe you do, but it doesn't seem like you have a ton of competitors in the space, at least not locally. You're making the case that it is a great economic opportunity, even without government incentives. Why are you kind of the one of the few who have launched a business and are embarking on this in a serious way?
I think if Greg Patterson's still here, he can vouch for this. He called me crazy when he first met me, and I told him this. So that might be why. The reason is, well, first of all, we do want competitors because we can't supply 2,000 metric tons a day. So we welcome competitors. But the reason that we don't have competitors is because you can't profitably run a hydrogen plant in and of itself right now. Hydrogen, it takes more electricity to make the hydrogen than it can actually produce, and you have to sell it for too high of a price. So in the typical entrepreneurial way, we're able to solve that chicken and egg problem by having a third revenue line that solves a critical national security issue, a supply chain issue, and swings our hydrogen from non-profitable, a loss, into profitability.
Can you explain that? I didn't understand that part.
All right. We have a third product line. We sell hydrogen, oxygen, and then we'll sell a byproduct of the water. So essentially there's no waste. Something that the byproduct is called heavy water. And I'm not making nuclear bombs.
I understand.
It's in everybody's cell phone right now. It's in your screen. I know. I put it there.
I see. It sounds smart. Okay. I think did we break news there? I don't know. That's news to me.
No, that was you can Insight Pharmaceuticals in Delaware. Insight Pharmaceuticals in Delaware has a deuterated drug. Where do they get this from? From the naturally occurring heavy water that's right here, and that has beneficial properties when we take that. I don't want to get into
Yeah, no,
pharmaceutical.
I got it. So over the long term, beyond that, it sounds like, is that a bridge to profitability? And then over the long term, you're betting on your scientists to innovate hydrogen to make it closer to that optimal efficiency? Is that what I'm hearing? That's what your business gamble is? That's why the secretary thinks you're crazy?
Yes.
Okay.
I think I might just because I'm crazy anyway, but that's exactly it. And you know what? Even if the engineering doesn't catch up, which it will, but and we can already see that it has caught up in R&D labs. So it's a TRL level 1. It needs to get all the way to 9. It's going to take 10, 15 years to get there. But even if it doesn't, there's still a market for everything that we're selling, and it's still decarbonized. It's hard to decarbonize industries. So we have a profitable business model, whether it takes 10 years or 30 years.
Okay. I understand. Let's jump back real quick, away from hydrogen for a second, to U.S. wind. This is the big power plant that was on the verge of being built. I'll first put the question to you, Chris. But what is your take? I mean, there's a pending lawsuit over a Sussex County permit to allow for building of a substation to accommodate that power plant. But more broadly, the Trump administration has absolutely expressed their antipathy towards offshore wind. Is this power plant going to be built? And in the face of that, and in the face of just serious opposition from a lot of folks who live right around here.
Yeah, right. The multi-billion-dollar question for sure. So just to address the issue with Sussex County, so folks are aware of that, the project, U.S. Wind, needs to build a substation to receive its power that it's exporting from the wind farm. And the location that they chose to build the substation was a really logical place to do that. It was on a parcel that was zoned heavy industrial. It was next to an existing substation, and it was near the coast. It was a great location. They bought it from NRG, who sold it to them. So any substation that you build in Sussex County, you have to get what's called a conditional use approval. You have to get the council to vote on that. First, you got to go through the Planning and Zoning Commission. They did. The Planning and Zoning Commission voted unanimously to approve that request for a conditional use. When it got to the council, it was a different story. 4 members of the council voted against it. 1 member voted for it, the president did, and he gave a fairly stern warning to the other members of council who voted against it. So the evidence that was provided by council at the time when they voted against it, there really was no reason that I heard why that parcel was not an appropriate place for a substation. So U.S. Wind is appealing the decision to Superior Court. They feel confident that that decision will be overturned, that the court will step in. It's hard to say what would happen after that. Do they give it back to Sussex County to make another decision? I really don't know. My feeling is that the court will do that as well, that they will intervene or somehow overturn that decision. There is a new council at Sussex County Council right now, a wonderful new council, right? So two of the folks that voted against that proposal are no longer on council. So I want to wrap up that informational piece by saying you can bet that the people that voted against that heard from their constituents. That's the most important take-home message there. So there is an opportunity for the new council to hear from their constituents about an issue that's very important to everybody. So in terms of the federal level, there has been an executive order issued by President Trump that says there will be no additional leasing or permitting of offshore wind projects in federal waters, and that there's going to be a big review of the whole federal leasing and permitting program, and we just don't understand what that timeline is. The good news for U.S. Wind is that they have all of their federal permits. They are awaiting for just one simple state permit from the state of Maryland for an air permit, and if they can get their county permit to build their substation, then they should be underway, right? However,
Just real quick, I
Yeah.
could be wrong about it, but didn't the Trump administration block a similar project in New York that had similar approvals?
Yes, you read my mind.
Okay.
Just last week, the Trump administration put a stop work order in on the Empire Wind project, which was being built off the coast of New York. It's almost a 1 gigawatt project, so a very large project. They had all their federal permits, they were under construction, and so that bombshell was dropped. Now, we don't know what the legal remedies are to that yet, but the governor of New York, as well as the company, has said that they are going to look to see what we're going to do. So I think right now we're in a situation where stakes are very high, things are getting crazy. We don't know how this is going to go. It certainly does not bode well for U.S. wind, but the company and the whole offshore wind industry is going to keep pushing, is going to keep showing its value to the American economy and keep trying to get this energy into the grid because we need it.
Okay. My initial thought, and this is just how I am sometimes, is I get stuck on one thing. You said showing their value. About 10 minutes ago, we talked about how offshore wind is much more expensive. At least that's the premise. How are they going to show value with energy that is presumably, and push back if I'm wrong, that presumably is quite a bit more expensive than other energy?
Yeah, totally. Well, first thing to remember is offshore wind is clean energy. So when you add in the fact that there are very little climate and health benefits, offshore wind and other forms of renewable energy wins every time, right? But in terms of like what the value is to Delaware, for example, from the U.S. wind project, U.S. Wind reached what I think is a wonderful deal with the state of Delaware on community benefits. So that project will be supplying 155,000 renewable energy credits to the state of Delaware every year to help it meet its renewable energy goals, right? Mm-hmm. That will save $3.5 million to Delaware ratepayers because they don't then have to pay to support other forms of renewable energy generation. And that's per year. In addition to that, U.S. Wind is investing $200 million to upgrade our regional grid. That will alleviate congestion pricing, and that will have a downward effect on our power prices. Plus, they're going to give something like, it's above $50 million in community benefits that will benefit Delaware State Parks. It will benefit dredging in the inland bays. It will help with baygrass restoration. It will also help support the shellfish aquaculture industry to develop waterfront areas so we can better harvest oysters.
And just so we can all understand it, I think much of the cost that we're talking about ongoing is the servicing of the debt that you take out to pay for the original upfront cost. Is that accurate? Like just the regular operations aside from debt servicing is not
operations
significant?
don't cost very much for offshore wind, but the equipment and yes, the capital are pretty big.
Okay, all right.
But I think, of course, this is a solution hydrogen can play because the cost. Let's make this clean. The cost of the wind is delivering those electrons from way offshore to somebody's house. What if and we spill electrons everywhere? They're spilling out of this microphone now. They're spilling everywhere. Well, let's stop spilling our energy. We talked earlier today about unplugging something that's not even plugged in to my cell phone. This is a major leak everywhere we go. All those wires up and down the way, they're spilling electrons. Convert it to hydrogen, and then the delivered cost by free enterprise would give the Delaware and Maryland and Delmarva Peninsula consumer a lower cost of electricity.
Well, that conversation about the supply and demand of electricity is going to continue because we're headed towards what most people describe as a crunch of supply. Unfortunately, I have to switch over to the public comment period now. So let's do that. Who wants to ask our two esteemed panelists a question? I'll let David.
Thank you. Hi, Johannes Sager-Lewis. I'm only speaking for myself when I ask this. Brief comment and a question. So the comment is, I attended a wind power forum at Indian River High School in Millsboro within the last 2 years, and several leaders of business in Sussex County proclaimed that there was no climate change. And a gentleman who lives, as he related, around Oak Orchard, so on the northern shore of the Indian River, proclaimed that he's been there for 50 years and there is no sea level rise. And I relate that to kind of illustrate the political positioning in Sussex County, and I know you know this, but there's a heavy lift there, and as I was saying to some folks earlier, we need to push education to the public so that when they hear this nonsense, they already heard the answer, no, it's nonsense, it is, which is actually true. My question is, so I'm going to leverage you for some Oppo research. There are people who are pushing small modular reactor. I think, no, it didn't. Good. My question is, if you happen to know, are they proposing to reprocess, which requires standing up a reprocessing industry, which probably take decades? And if they're not reprocessing, are they ending up at the same place at the end of the fuel cycle where they have to deal with waste, spent fuel rods first? Speak to it to the extent that you care.
I think I can answer hydrogen questions. I have no idea. I think Duke Energy is leading. I don't know how they're looking at it.
The question in essence is, what are they doing with the waste? Is that, yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to even speculate. I've had plenty to research, and I have not even gone there.
I think we have someone in the audience who knows.
Sure.
Oh, no. You have another question. You want to make up a quick one? We'll just go to the question.
Sure.
Thanks for asking my question. Hi, I'm Deanna. I'm a nurse practitioner and on a personal mission to make health the heart of climate action. So in all these discussions, I think we're just missing like a superpower of using the health voice, you know, the medical professionals to talk about the benefits of clean energy. Nurses for the 23rd year have been voted the most trusted vocation. So like we really need to use our health professionals to get the word out because health transcends climate issues. It makes it not a political issue. It's a health issue, climate change. And let's really use the health voice and get it out there. I'm in a healthcare organization that has 14,000 employees. I'm telling you, nobody knows about clean energy. Nobody's talking about that. We're in the trenches digging, you know, delivering great care. But if we could just figure out how to engage them into these issues, then they could tell all their patients about the health benefits of clean energy, and then I think your project will have more success with getting the offshore wind. So how do we engage? That's my question.
I really appreciate that. I think it is all about health. That's what we think about right now. Our healthcare costs are high. Our health is in trouble, and I love that nurses provide that opportunity. I think there's a lot more that we can do in terms of education. You can never do enough education. I think this forum is an awesome example of what those new things that we can be doing are.
Hi, I'm Joe Francis, and I'm a public health physician. We used to be trusted. But I have a different question, and I completely agree with what you say. And in my retirement, I actually am president of the Delaware Ornithological Society because part of our motivation is to get people out into nature, to appreciate it. Oh, and by the way, to walk. But my concern, I appreciate what you have to say. You represent industries that make money by the megawatt. What about Jevons paradox? Can you speak to that and what you all may be doing in your field to address that?
You're going to have to give us a little bit on that one.
We're 0 for 2 on Jevons paradox up here.
Paradox, and this is well documented and been in the literature fairly recently, is as we create efficiency, we generate more types of power, or we make our cars more fuel efficient, or we add lanes to our highways.
Or we build data centers for AI.
Exactly. We actually end up using more power. So while we may actually be seeing a higher percentage coming from renewable sources, the total carbon load may be flat or indeed still increasing.
Well, I think now I know what I have been thinking about for the past 5 years. It puts a name to it. I don't know the answer to the question, though.
I'd love to be able to convert all the not all, but some of the water in Delaware to hydrogen. In this case, with wind and solar, in this case, we're not touching carbon at all. And if we use nuclear, I think that it's like 0.2 grams per metric ton of hydrogen. So minimal carbon. That's a way to reverse Jevons paradox.
I mean, does it require, would you guys, Senator Hansen said mandate is a bad word in Dover, but would it require some sort of rigid regulations that say, no, you can't use this power data center, or no, somebody else can't use power?
I don't like mandates. I think let smart business drive it. And how are we going to mandate that? House Bill 99, for instance, says reduce our emissions by 50% by 2030, 100% by 2050. Cool, we all agree on that. That's good. We want to be able to breathe that air. Senator Hansen already told us today we import more energy than we make, 80 times more. How are we going to rate? Hey, Maryland, would you mind helping us out here? How are you going to mandate that? Better mandate it in Maryland or New Jersey, wherever the electrons are made.
Sure.
And then over here.
Hello, Marissa Montetson here. I'm the Environmental Justice Organizer with the Sierra Club Delaware chapter. I have one comment and then one question. My comment is about the 2% loss per mile. Our transmission system in general has about 2% loss, so I'm interested to see where the per mile came from. And the 0% loss from hydrogen is interesting because from what we're seeing, hydrogen is transported with natural gas. And as Chris said, with natural gas and methane, it leaks from pipes at very high rates. We're going to need to replace all of our pipes if we want to transport hydrogen long distances, and that will absolutely have more than 0% loss. So that's just kind of the comment. The question is, and Chris, I love that you brought this up as well, energy transition. There's also a just transition that needs to happen. So we have had environmental justice communities, Black and brown communities, low-income communities that have been subjected to like a lot more risk than any other communities as a part of our energy system, whether it be being located next to methane plants, next to gas plants, next to coal. If we are serious about having more forms of energy like hydrogen, how are we going to protect our communities and what plans are in process to make sure that happens? Also as a note, I know that Mach 2 did promise a lot of engagement with communities before they got finalized. That has not happened. I've been in coalition with folks who've said that they've reached out several times. I met with our federal delegation on this. The engagement has not been happening, the voices have not been heard. Folks are really scared. They're scared because right now we don't have anything to protect us with setback limits and all of that, and you're gonna add a new technology with no protection. So I just wanna hear, if we're serious about this, how are we going to protect the people that have historically not been protected? And I want it to be answered that's a little bit more than we're thinking about it. Thank you.
I wrote down the questions. There was a whole bunch of questions there. So the 2% overall, 2%, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about, but there's 2% loss on high voltage lines because it has a lower current. On the transmission lines, and that's what's mainly delivering the electrons from the plant to a local substation. Then when you get into the local substation, the transmission lines have a higher current, so you have about 5% loss. This is well documented. The electrical companies calculate a line loss into all of our bills. Hydrogen in pipes, yeah, I know the Romans had running water in their homes, and that was great for them. They had them right in the town center. They had aqueducts, but it was all in lead. That didn't work out too well. So there are ways to have the proper pipes to move the energy that we have. I don't think there's 1,600 miles of pipeline on the Gulf Coast that have very sophisticated hydrogen leak detection. So hydrogen is very expensive to make. It's also irresponsible to leak and unsafe to leak. So it would strike me that any type of leak that's going to cause the level of damage that you were mentioning is not viable business-wise. It's unsafe, and it's not something that we would do. I have a history in this state of running a very responsible chemical manufacturing company, adhering to all the DNREC laws, all the OSHA laws. We have people from 44 different nations working at that company. We've engaged in Internship Delaware, STEM literacy in the inner city. So there's a responsible way to run a company. I'm not going to change my colors. I know exactly how to do that. And that's why I'm working up and down the state in all 3 counties in Maryland, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey talking about this to the people who would matter. And every place we've gone into, we've been invited back, and people want us to buy land there because they know how we run our business.
I think we'll have to end it there, but I appreciate you guys. I think it was a very vibrant conversation. You tolerated my questions?
Thank you,
Yeah.
John.